Hi everyone, my name is Nisha Ajmani. I'm an attorney at Housing and Economic Rights Advocates. I work on the tenant team and the consumer rights team. So today's presentation will focus on debt collection and credit reporting for consumers. Not sure how many people are here, but we'll plan to answer questions at the end, I think. But you can put some questions in the chat, as you come up with them. This is just a disclaimer. This presentation is for informational purposes only and does not create an attorney-client relationship between you all and my organization, Housing and Economic Rights Advocates. I will provide more resources and information at the end of the workshop, and I believe this is being recorded. And I'm also happy to share the slides. Okay, so first I'm going to discuss debt, and then I'll get to the credit issues later. But just some basic information on how debt and credit are defined. So debt is money that you borrow on the condition that you pay it back. Usually there are extra charges such as interest. Credit is the money you receive, and debt is the money that you owe in return. So this is, what a credit card is. Um, you receive money when you purchase something with your credit card, and at the end of the month you have to pay it back. So there is good quote unquote debt versus bad debt. Credit or debt can be helpful if it puts you in a better financial position in the present or the future. And bad debt can end up costing you a lot more than you receive in credit. So before you decide to, for example, take out a loan or a credit card, you want to ask yourself, will taking out this debt help me to be in a better financial position in the future? Can I afford to pay it back? How much will this credit cost me? And I'll go into, how to determine the answers to those questions too. There's secured debt versus unsecured debt. So secured debt is a debt that has an asset tied to it. So for example, a car or a house. So if you don't pay back your debt, the lender can take the property from you. So that's, for example, foreclosure, that's what happens in a foreclosure or when a car is repossessed due to not paying the auto loan back timely. And then there's unsecured debt, which does not have property attached to it. So that is like a credit card, or just a loan where you um, have to pay it back, but it's not tied to any property. And if you don't repay it back, it'll go to collections, and potentially you could be sued on that. And again, I'll talk about that more later. So you want to be aware of the issues that can come up when you rely on credit cards. While they can be a convenient form of borrowing, people can end up in essentially a debt trap where they ultimately end up owing significantly more money than what they took out than when they initially took out the credit card. So, for example, here is a graph showing how much time it would take off to pay a balance of $6,081, depending on how much a person pays per month. So if they only pay the minimum amount, it would take 14 years, and then the interest is of course more. So the interest would be about $4,000.64. And then the total paid or owed would be over $10,000. So, with it, when you take out a card of approximately 6,000, you ultimately end up owing like $4,000 more. If you double the minimum payment, it would take approximately 5.5 years. to pay off. And the interest would be significantly less. It would be 1,500 approximately than if the person pays off the minimum payment only. And the total owed would be about 7,590. So again, it's significantly, better than than paying only the minimum payment. And then the minimum payment plus $100 would take less time, 3.5 years. The interest would be less, of course, on the other two options, about $1,400. And then the total owed, including interest, would be 7,490. So it's only we're pretty much like $100 less than double the minimum payment. But as you can see, it's a lot better if you can to pay double the minimum payment, at least, um, in order to not spend as much money for credit as you would if you only paid the minimum payment. And so this is information you want to look out for in applying for credit. So this is generally called the Truth in Lending Act box or TILA box, and it will show what the interest rate is, or that's also called the annual percentage rate. There's the finance charge, which is the dollar amount the credit will cost the consumer, the amount financed, which is the total amount of credit provided to the consumer, and then the total payments, the total amount you will have paid after all payments and interest, as scheduled. So I'm just going to show you kind of do a comparison between TILA boxes for these different types of lenders. The one on the left is kind of more traditional bank or credit union, and then the one on the right, so the black and white lollipop, that is check cashing stores or like payday loans, that type of thing, online lenders. So you start with the same amount for the personal loan, $2,500. That's how much you're taking off. You're taking out. So with the bank or credit union, well, you may have to pay it back over a year, so less time than the one on the right. Generally, the terms are a lot better. So your monthly payment is going to be less. It's going to be $217, and the interest rate is only 8% compared to 100%. Let me just see. So as you can see, the one on the right here is 24 months, so 2 years, but you still end up paying more per month, even though you have a longer time to pay it off. So there really isn't from what I'm seeing, an incentive to choose this one on the right. Um, though sometimes these check cashing stores are it's like more predatory, so you definitely have to be careful of them. Um, so as you can see, a lower interest rate, and the total number of payments for a bank or credit union for a loan of 2,500 would only be 2,609. And then versus 5,858 for the check cashing store or online lender. So I'm going to now just kind of discuss the timeline of what happens when a person falls behind on paying a debt, whether it's credit card or, personal loan. So first, the borrower is late at least 30 days. That's what constitutes a delinquency, is if it's late at least 30 days. Usually after about 120 to 180 days of being late or not paying on the credit card, the lender will report the debt as a loss simply for accounting purposes. So this is otherwise called a charge off. The borrower is still liable for this debt. This is really important because a lot of people think they hear charge off and they think that that means they don't owe the debt anymore. But it's just essentially a term that these banks use internally for their own kind of business records, but it doesn't change the amount that the borrower owes or their liability. Sometimes the lender will sell the debt to a debt buyer, sell the account. And so debt buyers, they are another type of company that will buy a ton of accounts for a lot less than what the balance actually is. Um, and debt buyers then attempt to collect on the debt. The the reason debt buyers do this is they often, um, when they take people to court, usually, unfortunately, consumers don't respond to the lawsuits on time. So the debt buyer wins lawsuits essentially that way by getting default judgments. So that's why it's important if you do get served with a lawsuit for a debt, you want to contact either my agency or another similar type of agency that can help you with a response. You have 30 days to respond to the lawsuit and get it served. So it's important to act quickly when you are served with a debt collection lawsuit. Okay, so what happens when you're sued? So they'll the lender will write something called a complaint, and consumers, the law requires them to be served in person. But if that's not possible for whatever reason, the plaintiff can get permission from the court to serve the person by mail or posting it to the door, or if that's still not successful under certain circumstances, the court can grant the plaintiff the ability to serve the consumer by posting it in the newspaper, for example. So you definitely want to be on the lookout. Don't throw your mail away or any of that sort of thing. It's important to keep in mind the statute of limitations for contracts. So if you fell behind on a credit card, let's say January 2020, and you don't get sued until May 2025, that's too late. I mean, they could technically still sue, but you would have a defense, given that they missed their deadline to sue within 4 years. So they should have sued by January 2024 if they wanted to obtain any sort of uh, compensation. So what happens if you lose a lawsuit? So either this can happen if you don't respond to the lawsuit within 30 days. The plaintiff can get a default judgment, which essentially means you automatically lose. And in that circumstance, they can garnish your wages or place liens on properties, and file for a bank levy. Some people are judgment proof, meaning that their income is protected by law. So it might be they receive some sort of public benefits, Social Security, that sort of thing. That cannot be touched by creditors. There's also a possibility that the lender will try to obtain assets from a house, for example. So this is called a homestead exemption. If a client, if sorry, if a consumer is has some sort of protection by law, California also has a law requiring a certain minimum amount of money has to be in the person's account in order to meet their basic necessities. So the person needs to file a claim of exemption if they are served with a wage garnishment um, or bank levy. And typically they have 10 days to do that, but uh, you can file it at any time, but it really should be within 10 days, as soon as possible after receiving the notice of wage garnishment. And here's just some information about what to be aware of when it comes to debt collectors and their behaviors. So don't give out sensitive information. A lot of this is, pretty straightforward. You don't need to speak with debt collectors. You can ask them to send an explanation of the debt to you in writing before you agree to speak with them. Make sure you don't give out personal information like your social security or your bank account numbers. If you feel threatened or bullied, you can hang up. You want to make sure you keep good records, save everything that you receive from debt collectors in the mail, keep copies of anything that you send to them, write down notes if you talk to them on the phone, with times and dates, and ideally the name of the person you spoke with. And like I mentioned earlier, if you're sued, you want to make sure you obtain legal help as soon as possible because you will only have 30 days to respond. And then you want to be aware of debt settlement companies. These are companies that claim that they can negotiate with your creditors to reduce the amount that you owe or, reach some sort of payment plan. But these companies can often be risky because they typically tell consumers to stop paying back their credit card debt. Usually it's credit cards. I'm just going to use that as an example. Um, and then what ends up happening is that consumers get sued because they're not paying their credit card. So essentially what the debt settlement companies say is, okay, give us the money instead. We'll build up like a pool of cash so we can make these agreements with your creditors. But then what ends up happening is consumers get sued because they're not paying the actual credit card company. And so what else should you know about your rights? A debt collector must stop all communications with you if you send, for example, a cease and desist letter, but they are allowed to communicate to you regarding a lawsuit by mail. You can also tell the debt collector how and when they can contact you, and you want to again make sure everything is in writing. What are some things debt collectors cannot do or say? They cannot call before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m. They can't harass, threaten, contact your boss, friends, and neighbors about the debt. Cannot lie. They cannot demand that you pay more than you actually owe, and they cannot authorize any unauthorized fees. Sorry, they cannot add or charge any unauthorized fees. So if you don't recognize a debt, even if you do, you'll want to send what's called a debt validation letter. So to make sure that that company has the legal right to collect the debt. Um, and then you also want to make sure that if you do reach some sort of agreement to pay a debt, like a reduced debt amount or a payment plan, you want to make sure all of that is in writing. Um, and you want to make sure that the debt is not past the statute of limitations, or otherwise uncollectible before you agree to make any payments. So if it's been more than 4 years, you don't want to agree to make any payments because that will start the clock again, essentially, meaning that they could sue you once you start making payments again and then fall behind. And so in a debt validation letter, you'll want to ask the debt collector the name and address of the original lender, and the original account number, the date the account was first opened, the date of the last recorded payment, the date that the debt was sold, if it was sold, and the amount of the debt at the time it was sold, the name, address, and phone number of the debt collector, the amount of the debt, including an explanation of fees, including such as interest or collection costs, and you'll want to ask them to send you any documents showing that the debt collector has the right to collect. So here is an example of a debt validation number, sorry, number, letter. And my agency, we have like a lot of these templates. So, if you're in this situation, we're happy to send you, one of these templates. And this will also be, in the slides that we send out. But this is what you'll want to say if you don't recognize a debt and want to dispute it, or maybe you do recognize the debt but don't believe that you owe it. You'll want to send a letter such as this. This is an example saying, I'm responding to your contact about collecting a debt. Provide your contact information and state that you don't believe that you owe the debt. And then ask for proof that they have that alleging that you do owe the debt. So you want to, just make sure you dispute it. And that sets you up for in case, there are issues down the line, you will have a record of your dispute and be able to include it, if anything goes to court. And then, so what happens if you already have a court judgment against you? So creditors cannot take money or property away from you unless they have successfully sued you in court and received a judgment against you. So as I was talking about before, even if there is a judgment against you, some income and assets are protected from collections. So for wage garnishment, no more than 25% of your wages can be garnished each pay period. There are exemptions. Again, if you're a very low income or a part-time wage earner, 100% of your wages might be able to be protected. And if your wages are needed to support yourself or your dependents, your wages should be exempt. Regards to bank levies, creditors cannot take money out of your bank account if the source of that money is protected by law. So, for example, most public benefits and Social Security are protected from collections. Wages in your bank account should be exempt as long as they are needed to support yourself and dependents. And in order to take advantage of these exemption opportunities, you should file a claim of exemption within 10 days. Again, so if you receive notice, you'll want to contact our agency or another agency as soon as possible. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about different types of debt. There's medical debt, student loans, mortgages. There's been a lot of development recently on medical debt. So in California, I believe it started this year, but I have to get the date correct. But most medical debt now cannot be reported on a person's credit report. There are also different types of like debt reduction programs that might be available through the hospital or doctor's office, whether it's a discounted payment plan or a program called Charity Care, which is state law that requires hospitals to provide either eliminate the medical debt or provide a reduced amount or some sort of payment plan to underinsured or uninsured individuals and who meet certain income requirements. Student loans, there are a variety of options to try to reduce the debt. Students can, or former students can apply for rehabilitation and consolidation, income-based repayment plans, loan forgiveness programs, and there are certain statutory discharges. So, for example, if the school closed or was sued in some sort of, lawsuit alleging fraud, in some cases, certain schools have to discharge the loans. And there's a whole list. And again, this is another area that there's a lot developing right now and changing. especially at the federal level. So definitely recommend contact. We do have a student loan department at our office, so definitely contacting us. Or there are other legal aid organizations that also provide help regarding student loans. So you'll definitely, want to seek assistance regarding student loans if that's something that you're dealing with, that you're having an issue with. And then mortgages for our homes, homeowners can get modifications to the mortgage, refinance, and in some localities, there's a local reinstatement assistance program. I don't know a whole lot about mortgages because I don't focus on that, but there's a homeownership team at my office. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about credit, and how to read a credit report and what the different terms mean in your credit report. So generally speaking, your credit report is an indicator of your financial wellness. A credit report collects information about your bill paying history, public record information, and record of your applications for credit. It shows how you have used your credit, how much of your credit you have used, how much available credit you have remaining, whether you've made your payments on time, and whether any of your accounts have been sent to a debt collector. It also includes kind of some basic demographic information like your name, phone number, previous employers. It can also include public records. So, um, public records of lawsuits, such as evictions, and bankruptcies. So evictions, it's only if you lost. So if you were, an eviction was filed against you, and you won the case, or if, um, even if the landlord won, but um, took more than 60 days to win that case, it cannot be reported. Um, some federal and state tax liens are reported. And then some credit reports contain arrests and convictions. I haven't seen that typically in like the main three credit reporting companies, which are Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Um, and then credit accounts. These are just, accounts you've had with creditors and bill paying history. Any accounts in collections will show up in your credit report and inquiries. So that means when you have applied for credit, and a lender reviews your credit report, um, there's uh, it's identified as an inquiry. There's hard inquiry, meaning you are the person who applies for credit, and then there's soft inquiry, meaning that a lender will check it or you receive, promotional materials in the mail. So it's important to note that the credit report is not the same as your credit score. The credit report is used to generate a credit score. And typically, the credit report will not include the credit score unless you pay extra for it. But you can get your credit report for free, and I'll provide some information about that later. And then some banks will have kind of a credit report section, and it will give you, with no extra charge, your credit report, and credit score. So you can keep that in mind. Okay, so why do credit reports matter? Banks and lenders and landlords, for example, will look at your credit report, before deciding whether or not to give you credit. So if you're applying for a mortgage, the lender will look at your credit and decide whether or not, to give you that mortgage so you can pay for a new home, for example. Um, Landlords, as I mentioned as well, they will almost 100% look at your credit report. I believe you can check a box saying you don't want them to look at your credit report, or you might have to check a box saying you give them permission to look at your credit report. But oftentimes it's kind of what's called a tenant screening report. So it includes some additional information, that might not necessarily be in the credit, in like a kind of a general credit report, like through Equifax or Experian. Um, in some cases, an insurance company will use your credit report to determine whether to give insurance coverage, and will um, identify the rates that the consumer will have to pay based on what's in your credit report. In some limited circumstances, employers can use a credit report to determine, whether to hire. And, this, I'm sure this is kind of obvious, but a good credit report can save consumers money and open opportunities, whereas a bad credit report can cost more money in the long run and close opportunities. That doesn't mean that things cannot be changed. It does take some time to repair credit, but it's definitely possible. I talked a little bit about this already, but just so you can see this, a chart about what is reported on your credit report and what is not. Credit cards are reported, mortgage loans, student loans, auto loans, anything in collections, judgments against the consumer, and sometimes personal loans. What's not reported, utility bill payments, rent payments. There's a new law in California, I think, where tenants can opt to include their rent payments in their credit report. Not sure exactly how I feel about that yet. I haven't really talked to people, so I'm not sure how that's going for tenants and consumers. But if a person doesn't have much credit history at all, maybe a recent college graduate, for example, and they're paying all of their rent on time and consistently, it can be good to show that you have some sort of history of paying um, bills on time. What else is not reported? Checking or savings accounts and card payments, any prepaid cards. So how is a credit score determined? These three companies, again, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian, those are the three main companies. They each have their own kind of algorithm to determine a score based on what's in a person's credit report. So this is just a general range of credit, and what is considered good credit and poor credit. So the credit scores will vary depending on who is pulling the credit report and what algorithm they use. A credit score summarizes what is in the consumer's credit report. So, for example, there's the FICO score and the Vantage score. Um, and these are pie charts that show kind of like the different weight these um, companies will give to different parts of a person's credit report. So, um, their payment history, you know, did they did the person pay on time? 100%. Did they miss payments? Were they late on payments? Um, the total amount owed, the length of the credit history. So, 10 years or 1 year, for example. Any new credit, and the types of credit used. So whether that's, student loans or mortgages, just kind of like having a variety of different types of credit. Um, and so here over on the Vantage score pie chart, it's a little bit similar. Payment history is again like a large chunk of what is reviewed and assessed in terms of um, providing a score. Um, how frequently the person uses their credit, how much credit they have used, and the total balances, and then recent credit, any new, applications for credit, and then the available credit remaining. And Credit scores do vary depending, again, on which model is used. But you can go to this website called www.reasoncode.org to determine what codes might apply in determining your credit score. Um, so you have rights and options regarding your credit report. There's the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which requires each of the credit reporting agencies to provide you with a free copy of your credit report at your request at least once every 12 months. Typically, we tell people to go to annualcreditreport.com. You can download your credit report there. You can also call them, and they have you can get the three agencies' credit reports at annualcreditreport.com. And this is the only website you should use because there are a lot of scams out there. So you definitely want to make sure to use this particular website if that's how you want to obtain your credit report. And you can also request it by mail or by phone. And then you have the right to have errors corrected. So if you see mistakes in your credit report, for example, you paid, a credit card on time, but it's showing that you missed a payment, that's definitely something you will want to have corrected. Or if it's showing, an account that you never took out, or maybe somebody stole your identity and there's a um, Comcast account on your report that you never took out yourself, that's definitely something you will want to have addressed and rectified. So obviously those issues can negatively affect your credit score. So when there's something incorrect in your credit report, it's very important to try to get it corrected as soon as possible. And then a credit reporting agency only has an obligation to modify or delete an account trade line as appropriate if it is found to be inaccurate or incomplete or cannot be verified. So the credit reporting agency will have to do an investigation to determine whether or not the complaint that the consumer is making about an item in their credit report, the credit reporting agency will have to assess that and determine, whether it is in fact inaccurate. Um, so identity theft victims do have special rights. For example, they can have their credit card frozen. Well, anybody can have their ask for their their credit report to be frozen. But there are certain additional rights for identity theft victims. In general, reporting of negative information on a person's credit report can only be reported for 7 years. A bankruptcy can be reported for up to 10 years. So if a person has an account in collections, that account can be reported for 7 years. After 7 years, if it's still not paid, it has to be deleted from the person's credit report. It should generally fall off of the credit report by itself. If it doesn't, then yeah, you'll definitely want to seek assistance to get it removed. And then consumers have the right to dispute unauthorized use. So they have the right to bring a civil action against anyone who improperly obtains access to their file, knowingly or willfully misuses their filed data, or fails to correct inaccurate filed data. So how can you take steps to improve your credit report and credit score? Here's, a list of some things that can help. Like I've talked about before, you want to make sure that you review your credit report with regularity, especially if you're, trying to save up to buy a house or that sort of thing, or a car, and you anticipate that you'll be applying for credit. You'll want to review your credit report, and determine whether there is anything incorrect on it, and then dispute the errors. And once you dispute what will happen is pretty quickly after this dispute is received, it should show up on your credit report as the account being in dispute. You'll want to use safe credit building products like affordable loans, and credit unions often have some some more options for people. Definitely, a lot of this is, straightforward. You want to pay your bills on time and you want to, as best as possible, keep the amount of credit that you use to less than 30% of the limit. So if you have a credit card, and the limit is $1,000, you generally don't want to spend more than $300. You don't want to have a balance of more than $300 if you can. Resolve student loan debt, develop a plan to take care of any outstanding judgments and liens. Try to use a diversity of credit sources. So, for example, credit card, student loans, auto loans, that sort of thing. Um, if you can get on a payment for medical debt, or try to get medical debt completely eliminated. Again, in California, and there's a new law that essentially requires medical debt to or eliminates most instances of when medical debt can be reported on a credit report. However, there's also obviously, with the new administration, there was a federal law in place before that was similar, but now that's probably not going to happen. So it's a little bit unclear. You'll definitely want to get some clarity from an attorney if you're dealing with medical debt. Also, even if it can't be reported on your credit report, a hospital, for example, or um, the medical debt collector can still sue a person for medical debt owed. In certain circumstances, people can ask for a goodwill deletion, for an unusually late payment. For example, maybe they were in the hospital, for an unexpected accident, and they missed their payment. But otherwise, they've paid everything on time and in full. That's definitely, a, an, um, an instance when it makes sense to ask for a goodwill deletion from your credit report. And then consumers can also negotiate with collection agencies to not report in exchange for payment. So that's a possibility. And then definitely do your best to pay down any old debt, um, or debt that is in collections. And then, as I talked about before, you definitely want to keep your eye out for scams. We see a lot of, companies that try to take advantage of consumers. You want to watch out for credit repair scams. So companies that say will repair your credit report, for $100 a month, when you can actually get help for free from agencies like my organization. A lot of those credit repair scam companies are doing illegal business. So definitely, before you sign up for anything like that, you'll want to talk to an attorney and see if it is a legitimate, type of payment plan. And you don't want to enroll in any credit building products that are expensive, make you buy things that you don't need, and encourage you to keep a balance every month. So, how do you dispute errors on a credit report? Here are just some few basic steps. You first want to tell the credit reporting agency in writing what information you think is inaccurate. So again, it's best to dispute this by letter, certified mail with a return receipt requested. You want to make sure to include copies of any relevant documents that support your position that you don't owe the debt, that is reported, or you believe it's inaccurate in some way. You want to you want to identify the information that is wrong and explain why it is wrong, and include any documents you might have that show why it is wrong. Credit reporting agencies generally must respond within 30 days unless it's a frivolous complaint, but sometimes this can be extended to 45 days. The second step you want to do is you want to tell the furnisher, meaning the company that is providing the information to the credit reporting agency. You want to tell them in writing that you dispute the item on your credit report. And if the provider continues to report the item, um, it must let the credit reporting company know about your dispute. So if you are correct, that is that the information you dispute is found to be inaccurate or incomplete by the credit reporting agency, the furnisher must tell the credit reporting agency company to update or delete the item. And sometimes the credit reporting agency will do that on their own. But you'll definitely want to, stay on top of that. So sorry, this note is not really relevant anymore. So we'll forward. Here's a sample letter that is from the Federal Trade Commission on how to dispute an error on your credit report. And we have these templates with our office. So, if this is something you're dealing with, you definitely want to reach out to us and we can do our best to try to help you and send you some templates. Or, depending on what the issue is, there might be other things that we can do. This is just kind of, generally, I'm writing to dispute this account on my file. This is what is incorrect, and why, and I'm attaching, documents that support that. I am requesting that the item be removed or that you correct the information. Okay. Okay, so that's it. I'm providing more information about HERA in general and what we are able to help with. So as you can see, obviously debt collection and credit reporting, various financial products and recommendations, such as affordable small dollar loans, credit building products, mortgages, foreclosure prevention, and mortgage servicing issues, tenants, as I mentioned earlier, I'm on the tenant rights team, so we help with a variety of pre-eviction concerns, including harassment, fair housing, habitability problems, landlord and tenant disputes, a variety of landlord and tenant disputes, and credit and debt concerns when seeking housing. We do not help with evictions when somebody has been served with an official summons and complaint. We refer out to there are like four different legal aid organizations in the East Bay that can help with eviction defense. We do help veterans and service members, and then we also have an estate planning team that can help with simple wills, trusts, health directives, and a power of attorney. All of our services are free except estate planning, which does have a sliding scale. But if the sliding scale, like calculator, determines that the person can't pay anything, we'll still help them. So that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions people have now. Um, it looks like there are some in the chat. Um, what are our rights after the debt purchase? Um,
Oh, that's my question.
oh,
What I
hi.
really wanted, I have a specific question is after they sell our credit, um, does the debt company have to have a contract with us? Is that like legally binding?
The
After,
debt, you mean the company that buys the debt?
yeah, the company that buys the debt, are they
Um,
the original contractor now
so
or
if you're being sued, that's a defense essentially. You should contact our office, but I don't want to. I can't get into
okay,
the details of each specific case, but generally, a debt buyer is not going to have a debt. Sorry, is not going to have a contract directly with the consumer. So that is often considered what's called an affirmative defense in a lawsuit, meaning there's a strong argument the consumer has that they essentially should win the lawsuit because the debt buyer cannot prove that they actually have a contract with the consumer.
okay, okay. Yeah, that's what I read somewhere. Just I'm gonna make an appointment with you guys because I have a
Okay.
couple
Yeah,
questions.
definitely. We also we do have clinics in San Joaquin County. I don't know where the debt is, but we don't have an Alameda County clinic, unfortunately, but we do have Stanislaus County, San Joaquin, and Sacramento.
I'll make my
Um,
way over to you guys. It's okay. Yeah.
we also help remotely, so you don't need to meet us in person. Um,
Okay. I did respond with an affirmative, but my affirmative response was essentially that I was low income. I just looked something up on Chat GPT and I gave my income. I did the fee waiver, but I want to talk to your company. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely reach out to us. Our number is below, and then I'll put our email in the chat. I think it's inquiries at
And I just had another question. If see, when before I got sued, I asked for a proof of debt, and it's because it's like with Synchrony Bank, and I had a credit card with them, and they sent me the wrong proof of debt that they're suing me for. Now
um,
that I'm waiting for a judge, well, I have a court order date, like I have a date to see the judge, but while I'm waiting, um I still want a proof of debt because I paid them. They're charging me way over than what I've already paid.
so I don't mean to interrupt you, but this is definitely something I'd recommend talking to when you call our office. You'll want to talk kind of like specific. I can't answer specific questions in
Right. I
this
was just going to ask if
setting.
I should
So yeah,
contact them.
definitely
Yeah.
that's something you'll want to talk to the
Okay. I
attorney.
understand. Thank you.
Yeah. Can a credit union garnish your wage without a judgment? No, they need a judgment from a court. Um, while I'm waiting for my court date, is it okay to reach out to them? Yes, but again, I would talk to an attorney first before, you communicate directly with them. Does any bank use different sources of credit score other than the big three? I'm not sure. That's a good question. Possibly. I'm sorry. I really can't answer that. I'm not sure. But that's something I can look into. Um, And so, yeah, here's our email address. You can call us at 510-271-8443 to set up an appointment, or you can email us